I wanted to offer this special class for a few reasons. First of all, since the death of George Floyd, events have felt like sort of an important moment in American history to me. I feel like this is going to be in the history books one day. So I thought it was something worth kind of calling a special class about. Also, I was thinking about all of you who are the immigrants that are our students at Literacy for Life, and you may be new in the United States. Maybe you don't know a lot about American history and culture. I know when I've lived in other countries, when things are going on, it can be confusing and interesting and maybe even a little scary. So I just wanted to give this opportunity for you guys to learn more about what's going on and sort of what the history is behind that, and a little bit of the English that you need to understand it. And then finally, I think one of the great things about Literacy for Life is that we do bring together people from literally all over the world. If you look around this Zoom class, we have people from all over the world. And we also bring together people from all walks of life in Williamsburg. All different communities within Williamsburg. And I feel like one of the most important things about education is that we meet people who are different and we learn from each other. So I thought this was a really great opportunity to do that. So what I'd like to do is give an opportunity for our guests to introduce themselves. And we'll hear a little bit about, it was interesting. We had a conversation a few days ago to plan this class, and the folks I've invited to join us today all have very different ages, from different parts of the country, different backgrounds. So this will sort of, I think, help just see that how much diversity there is, within even one population of experience and of opinion. So let's go ahead and I guess, Sharon, would you mind going first? Let's start by just having you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about, sort of your personal history, background, where you're from, that kind of thing.
My name is Sharon Abney. I currently have been with Literacy for Life for 2.5, 3 years. I originally was born in South Carolina. At the time I was born, where I lived at in South Carolina was segregated. The blacks lived on one side and the whites lived on another side. I went to an all-black schools from kindergarten to 8th grade. At that time, I didn't know any better. I just thought that was just the way it was supposed to be, because I didn't know anything was different. You stay on your side of the tracks pretty much. I also, during the summer when I lived in South Carolina, we would have a gentleman would pick us up in a truck, a bunch of us, my sisters, brothers, and we would go pick tobacco, and we would also pick cotton. And so it was pretty much, I didn't know any better. I didn't know, at that time, being young, it was the norm for me. I had no idea that there was schools that were integrated. I didn't know nothing about integration. I didn't know anything about discrimination. It was pretty much the norm. I would see as we call them, chain gangs. The white officers with rifles, the gentlemen with striped jail. Chain gangs was basically people that were in jail or prison, I'm sorry, and would be out there cleaning the streets, but they were in black and white stripes with chains on their legs. So as far as I was concerned, that was the norm. I didn't know any different when I was in South Carolina. We went to certain stores, we didn't go out to certain restaurants. That was pretty much the way it was. They started to desegregate the schools, or I should say integrate the schools, I'm sorry, in the 70s, the early 70s. And that's where fights started happening. There was fights, the people from the whites and the blacks had to basically be bused, taking a school bus across the lines, where blacks would go to the white side, the whites would go to the black side. So there was a lot of fighting, and that's when my mother said, it's time to go. We needed to go north. You came to Connecticut when I think I was in 8th or 9th grade. And that was an awakening for me. we were in a city that pretty much was mixed. I was like, what's going on? You know, there was black and whites. It was completely different. I didn't understand it. The school I went to was mixed. Everybody accepted us. There was no problems. It was different. What I thought was normal was not normal. So it was pretty interesting. And as I grew up and then went to college, you know, I went to college in Connecticut, stayed there. The only other discrimination I ran into was when I bought my first house. And the lady at the bank didn't believe I graduated from college. She wanted to see my college diploma. And my attorney said this has nothing to do with her getting a house. She wouldn't give us the mortgage unless we proved that we graduated from college. So that was that was something I experienced that was just, I just couldn't believe it. But anyways, so I kind of condensed all this in, but as I look back and I saw what happened when we were in South Carolina, and I said, you know, I didn't know any, as I said to you, I didn't know any different. And I look at now what's going on now, the fighting and the protesting and demonstration, and it seems as though we've come back. We've gone from there, we're back to where we were in the 50s and 60s. The only difference is the protesting now, at that time, was all African Americans. Now, it's everyone is protesting of all races, from all countries. And that was a great thing. That's a great thing to see. Because before it was just all African Americans, dogs being sicked on us. I mean, I wasn't part of it, but my mother was. My mother was arrested. She was trying to go to college and she couldn't go. They arrested her because she could not go to college because she was African American. They wouldn't let her go, so they arrested her. She walked in anyways. And that was in South Carolina. So it's just, you know, I've even my own children don't really understand because they were never there. They don't, you know, I talk to them about it. But it's something that I still think about. You know, I think about the days I was on the tobacco field. I didn't know any different. I was picking tobacco. You know, it was all of us out there. The guy would pay us a little bit of money, and to me, that was just the way it was. But it was an experience, and it's something my mother will not talk about. She's pretty much will not discuss it. She will not talk about it, but I will never forget it. But things have come a long way, and we have a long way to go, but it seems as though we're going backwards. That's the only problem. I'm seeing things go backwards, and I don't like it. So, but that's pretty much it. I hope I kind of condensed it all.
No, that's great, Sharon. Thank you. Yeah, we'll come back around and talk more. But let's go ahead and continue with the introductions. That was great. Thank you. So Monique and Brandon, would you like to go next?
Yes, we would.
Hello, everybody.
I'll let, you want me to go first? Huh?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. As you all can see, I am Monique Randall. I'm currently an ESL teacher online in the mornings, and I'm also a stay-at-home mom of 3, so I'm excited about that. But I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. in the 80s and in the 90s. So for me with color, honestly, I was surrounded by nothing but African Americans like all of my life until I was about 16. We saw, and my mom and dad and worked downtown for the federal government. So of course we had interaction with people of other cultures and races. However, I did not go to school. I was telling my husband the other day, I can really not recall going to school with other white kids or any other races really in the DC area. And my husband was thinking, so I remember with DC, a lot of the majority of the population, of course, was Black, but that wasn't always so. So when the Blacks moved in, I guess, when they started desegregating or in the 60s and 70s, a lot of the whites moved out of the cities to the suburban areas, I guess to get away. I'm not sure, but that's pretty much how I grew up. Now, my mom married in 1996, and we moved to a small town called South Hill, Virginia. And that's when I started seeing the divide between whites and blacks. I'd heard it, I learned it. I learned American history, Black history. That was nothing for us in DC public schools. That was who we were. You know, we learned the American history, but we also learned Black history, which was really cool. It wasn't just celebrated in 1 month of the year. So when I moved to South Hill, Virginia, I remember my first interaction with really seeing the race thing. I walked into an American history class, and literally there were whites on one side and blacks on the other. And I was completely shocked. At this time, this is 1997. So that kind of like threw me off. So that's when it kind of opened my eyes to, okay, of course I knew the world wasn't all Black, but I could see that there was a difference. But the crazy thing was the kids there, they didn't see anything wrong with it. They were so accustomed to sitting on this side and sitting on that side. So it came time for me to graduate and go on to college. And I wanted to go back home and to attend Howard University. My mom said, she said, the world is not Black. You have to be exposed to other cultures and races so that you can learn that things do exist outside of Washington, D.C. So I went to Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, which is where I met my husband. And it was country. It was backwards to me. We were located in the middle of nowhere, but that's when I saw, my eyes were open to even more things that were just like, wow, this is totally not what I grew up around, what I was not used to. So we now reside in Williamsburg, and we're excited to see what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's just, man, it's an amazing time to be a part of history now. I'm excited. It was great hearing, you know, Miss Sharon's take on everything, because I've heard those stories that my parents went through in the 50s and the 60s, you know, the integration and all. So that's pretty much it right now. I'll hand it over to Brandon.
Well, hello again to everybody. And I think from my standpoint, you know, just hearing my wife's kind of perspective and her experience, and also Miss Sharon's as well, it's just really neat to hear people's experiences. That's why I think this is so cool, just to look even on the Zoom to see so many different kinds of people, so many different looks. And we're all unique in many ways, and our experiences are unique as well. And it's so neat that we can have an opportunity and a platform to understand from each other. I think that's powerful. I grew up in West Virginia. So you have Virginia and West Virginia. West Virginia is a very small state, population-wise, and many people have jokes about the great state of West Virginia. But it was wonderful for me. I grew up in Charleston, West Virginia. I am the son of Edgar and Belinda Randall, who met in West Virginia. My father's from Williamsburg, Virginia, which is a very historic place in American history. And my mother grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is an industrial city built around steel during the Industrial Revolution. So they both met in West Virginia. My father played basketball there and ultimately became a coach when he graduated from there. And so myself and my younger brother, the two of us grew up on the campus of West Virginia State College. We had, as far as schooling, you know, our school was pretty integrated. So I was comfortable around all different kinds of people and didn't really know any different, you know, coming up. Also being an athlete and having sports being such a big part of my life. I played basketball all throughout and played college basketball. My brother is a football player, basketball player. He actually played professional football. So sports has been really big. And sports is one of those things that unifies people. You know, I think that's been a challenge with COVID, because sports is so integral in bringing our world together in many ways. It kind of feels weird, but because it doesn't allow us to connect sometimes in the ways that we used to, or we're used to and accustomed to. But sports allow me also to be exposed to different people, different cultures, different experiences. And so that I think also helped give me a broader view an appreciation for an understanding of different kinds of people. When you have to compete in a sport, you don't have time to worry about differences. You have to come together and figure out ways to compete and to win. And so I value that that opportunity because it really helped me have proper perspective and appreciation for all people. Fast forward into college, elementary, middle, high school was pretty much the same. College was very different. So my wife mentioned we met in college. She attended Longwood University. I attended a historic all-male institution. It's called Hampden-Sydney College. Hampden-Sydney College has about 1,000 students, and I was probably one of about 30 to maybe 40 African-American individuals on the entire campus. So you can imagine it is a very different experience when you are such a small group of the entire population. Now, I didn't understand this at that point. I came to appreciate and understand it afterwards, but Farmville is located in Prince Edward County. And if you go and study your history books, there's a historic Supreme Court case, Brown versus the Board of Education, which basically began integration in the United States. Well, that really was sparked from Farmville, Virginia. Ultimately, what happened in this particular county is when the federal government basically mandated integration, the Prince Edward County school system literally closed down. And so you had Black students who had nowhere to go for school. I think it was about 4 years. Mm-hmm. And the white population opened up a private school for their students to attend. And so you have a gap. Speaking of literacy for life, you have a literacy gap in Prince Edward County of people who basically never had an opportunity to really finish education. A lot of people, there's a huge illiteracy problem in Prince Edward County still today, and it's all a echo of Brown versus Board of Education and a failure, honestly, to embrace going to school together. And there's all kind of ramifications from that. So this is all happening where I went to college, and I didn't really understand that backdrop. But obviously, racism is still a major issue there. There was a lot of different mindsets in college where, you know, a lot of Confederate flags, which is a hot topic right now, nationally and even now internationally. It was nothing to see them draped over windows. I heard the N-word several times when I was there. Everybody wasn't that way, so I don't want to paint the picture that it was a racist school. There were racist people, and there were people who maybe just were ignorant because they didn't have an opportunity to be around people who didn't look or think or act like them. So it was a wonderful experience, even with the negative stuff, because again, I think I was able to, one, understand how to survive and to maneuver around different kind of situations. But that's kind of my story. I'm just an athlete with an opportunity and a blessing to be able to see and learn from a lot of different people.
All right, great. Keenan, you're up.
Hi, hello everyone. My name's Keenan Robinson. I've been with the organization since, I want to say, August of last year, so almost a year now. I'm a student at Christopher Newport University. I study English and I'm minoring in linguistics with plans, obviously, to become an ESL teacher post-graduation. Yeah, so my background is not nearly as interesting, I would say, as the last two speakers, but and I would say that coming from my generation, someone who is on the younger side, I guess, quote unquote, I would say that things have gotten better, especially when you have like a knowledge of history in general. But with that being said, despite that, you know, people in my generation thinking that racism is like uncool, basically. Like if you're a racist, that's basically shunned and it's seen as like weird and they're ostracized. But I will agree with Sharon that things are kind of progressing a little bit, because even with the improvements that we made, I've experienced certain prejudices in my lifetime. Like I've been stopped in my neighborhood twice for walking early in the morning, and I've been followed once. Things like that. I haven't been called the N-word or anything like that, or anything nearly as intense, but I've experienced like online harassment, like being mixed race. I've been called an abomination, or I never should have been born, or things like that by people I've never even met or known somehow. So it's very strange. And when I first came to the United States, I remember, because it wasn't until I came here, until I was about 6 years old, that people started asking me questions on why. Oh yeah, why are your mom and dad different races? That's really weird. Like, what's going on with that? And I didn't think that was a problem, because when I grew up and when I lived in Northamptonshire, UK, it wasn't. It was a very diverse experience. Like, there's people from many walks of life. Like, you had people from Pakistan and the West Indies, and India, and all types of different walks of life. So it was very strange to me to bring. That was like the first experience I had that I knew that I was like quote unquote different, or like I was a minority of some kind. That was like the Toni Morrison moment when you find out you're first black. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I experienced certain prejudices, and yeah, it's kind of sad to say that even amongst my generation, there's a rise in the far right thinking, and it goes by the term the alt right, the alternative right. So there's a rise in like far right ideology, and I think that's a concern for my generation too. And like I would say again, like Sharon is right in a lot of ways. We are kind of regressing, and we're back to square one. So like in one breath, we have a lot of improvements that we've made, obviously, since the apartheid South Africa and like the civil rights movement. But in some ways, we're kind of like bring up old wounds a little bit in that same breath. Yeah. So I've actually had experience attending Black Lives Matter events too. I've attended like one or two. So there's that too. I guess some experience on that front, but other than that, yeah, that's a cursory view of my experience.
And
Yeah.
Keenan, you went to high school here in Williamsburg, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't, be honest with you, it wasn't really, I can't really speak to like any segregation experience, I guess. Like, it wasn't nearly as intense like with Brandon and Monique's experience, where like not Brandon's, but Monique's experience, where you had like white people sitting on one side of the room, or black people. Like, it wasn't like that. It was pretty integrated. Everyone was pretty much cool. Like it was the same kind of view, the same kind of overall view that like racism was like kind of weird, and like basically everyone kind of mixed together, and there was like no problems. So it's kind of odd to me, like how it's kind of like it's like at a Twilight Zone moment when you see kind of history repeating itself. But my experience throughout my life has mostly been positive in terms of racial relations, for lack of a better word. Even though I've experienced like minor prejudices, not nearly as intense as someone as like Sharon's experience as living in segregated South, but I can honestly speak to that. I can empathize with the view of that, of experiencing certain racism. Yeah.
Okay. So we had talked about, sort of talking about a little bit about history, even of personal history, and then talking a little bit about opinions of the sort of the moment. You guys have touched on that already a little bit, but Sharon, is there anything, if I were to ask you sort of what are your opinions of the events that are going on right now? What do you see as sort of most important, or most concerning, or most hopeful? What would you say are your key opinions of the events today?
Well, what I'm hoping for is that we don't go deeper into where we were. And I'm not sure how we're going to come out of this, because it seems as though it's getting worse every day. Something happens. I'm hoping something good comes out of it, but some of the rhetoric has been sort of feeding into this fire of whether it's the white nationalists. All of a sudden, all these things are happening, and it's just, I'm not even sure we're going to come out of this soon. It seems as though the fire keeps getting bigger. And I'm hoping we can come out of this, because I have friends of mine are saying to me, sometimes I'm afraid to go out. I even myself feel uncomfortable going out. You know, I'm almost like paranoid, really. You know, I go out, I'm saying, you know, I have the mask on, and, you know, you wonder what people think about you when they look at you. And, you know, I almost feel, and it's sort of weird because I didn't feel this way when I lived in the South and it was segregated. But I feel this way. I feel more paranoid now than I did in the 60s, in the 50s. So, and I don't know why. I haven't been able to really figure out how are we going to get out of this? How are we going to become better? And it scares me because I don't know how long it's going to take, because it still things keep piling on. I'm hoping at some point it will end and people will, you know, get to the reality of, you know, equal rights. You know, I just don't want to keep going. I just don't like where things are going. I mean, it's just, I think if there wasn't so much rhetoric and things that I hear that are being said and the negativeness, and if people would just see what's going on and what they need to do, and what they need to improve and what needs to happen, the reforms that need to happen, but it's like we're going backwards. It's crazy. And it scares me. I'm literally scared.
So you worry about just sort of the level of kind of tension and anger and the sort of shouting at each other instead of finding solutions.
It brings back memories. I mean, even though I wasn't in it, but I'm like, where are we? This is 2020. Why are we still in 1950 and 1960? What happened? And I'm really serious. A lot of my friends, my family, were all sort of scared. I'm like, where am I living? What's going on? But I want to see a lot of change, a lot of reforms. I mean, I don't know how that's going to happen. I really don't at this stage, because the fire is so big. It's going to take a lot to put it out.
So what do you see as, you know, one or two kind of most important changes that you would hope would come out of this time?
Well, one, the police department. I have a lot of inside stuff, you know, regarding the police departments in general. Even when I lived in Connecticut, there needs to be a lot of change. There really needs to be a lot of change in the police department, because there's a lot of things that I know, that I see, you know, in criminal justice. To this day, things need to change. And can I change everybody's mind? Can I change the guy that has the big Confederate flag that's hanging, you know, can I change the white nationalists? Can I change the Ku Klux Klan? I don't know. I don't know if I can change them. But I think if we continue to try to convince people to think about equality and not hate, then that's what I want to see. These still keep trying. Just keep trying. Don't give up.
All right, thank you. Monique and Brandon, what about you guys? Are kind of opinions on the current moment and, you know, hopes, priorities?
We're very hopeful. I guess to hear Miss Sharon and how she feels, I don't really feel threatened to go out. And maybe it's because of our community here in Williamsburg. If maybe we lived in a bigger city, I'd probably be a little more concerned about our safety. However, I am so excited because my thoughts are, before it gets better, it probably will get worse. A lot of things. Before things can be fixed, we have to dig a little deeper to the root cause of the hatred, you know, the racism, the discrimination, the prejudices. We have to be willing to openly express ourselves without being defensive, and being able to really listen to people. That is so, so important with us. Brandon and I are fighting because we know the generation that's coming behind us. We want it to be way better for them. And what Miss Sharon and my parents did and our grandparents did, they fought so that it could be the way it is now. We have gone back a little, but I feel like we are definitely far ahead of the 50s and the 60s, you know. So we're very hopeful. We're teaching respect, of course, around here of all people, no matter the color of your skin for our kids. We're teaching love, because we know that that is the root right there. That is what's missing. Love, Love. And it's not just a word. We have to do it through actions. So that's been our main focus around here. We've been really educating the kids to prepare them. It's been tough, I'm gonna be honest, to tell my 12-year-old son that you already have a strike against you because of your beautiful brown skin. And so that's been tough, just talking to him about that. But we're pushing through. We're hopeful. We know that change will come. And I want people to know, too, another thing, we're against, of course, bad policing. We're not against police as a whole. We love the men and women that serve our community and our country. So we just want the bad apples weeded out, kicked out, and held accountable, because as a leader, you should be held to a higher standard of accountability, not only just locally, but statewide, federally, and internationally. So that is so important to us. We're teaching love, respect, and accountability for the things that you say.
I think the thing that excites me as well, and I think my feeling right now is I'm encouraged. I definitely feel encouraged to see the response that has been overwhelming, not only in the United States, but all over the world. And I think Ms. Sharon mentioned that, in the civil rights movement, it was predominantly African Americans who were standing up for their own rights and trying to fight back against a system that was really, really oppressive and violent and ugly and nasty. But today, and it encourages me also to see people like Keenan on here, because a new generation has emerged and racism is weird, as he mentioned. And so you now have them saying, what the heck what are we doing? Like, what are y'all doing? You look stupid. You look silly. And so they're speaking up. And to me, that is what is most encouraging, because I think for the longest time, you oftentimes only hear from the extremes on both sides of the conversation. You hear from those who are very articulate, very awesome, very engaged, and they're activists. They're, the Martin Luther Kings and Malcolm X's, and they represent, for the people, but they're the voice that's heard, and really, and many times, the only voice that's heard. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who are extremely racist and bigoted and prejudiced, and they seem to somehow have a platform that allows them to be heard as well. But to me, the power is in the middle. The power is in between those two poles. And right now, what I'm seeing is the middle is actually no longer silent. And because of social media, they can have a voice and they can be heard, and it is very loud. And so the protests, for the most part, are not the people on the extremes. They're popping up here and there. But to see global protest, it shows to me that the people in the middle have finally said, this is not right. And that's Ms. Sharon's demographic. That's Keenan's demographic. That's our demographic. And so all these different generations are now all kind of involved in this discussion, and this activity. And the people who maybe haven't spoken in some time, and I have to be honest, that includes myself, because in many cases prior to Ahmaud Arbery, that was the one that kind of resonated with me to say, hey, it's cool to share pictures of my kids on Facebook. It's okay to talk about the date night that we had that was really fun, and the movie that we saw that was really nice. But I need to also be willing to stand up and say something when something is so outrageously wrong.
Yeah.
I cannot be silent. Like, that is not okay. That is not cool. And so I think there were many people like myself who finally said enough is enough. We need to say something. And that to me is encouraging.
Great, thank you. All right, Keenan, what about you? Anything to add?
Yes, I would kind of agree with Sharon, because there was an interview with Dr. Cornell recently, Cornell West. I don't know if anyone's familiar with him, where he basically said that we're at a crossroads right now in our culture, historically speaking. In other words, that the chickens are coming home to roost. We're going to realize that the system in place is oppressive, and there's institutionalized racism and classism and things of that nature that's basically oppressing not just minorities, but all people, all Americans. And we have to realize that we're in this together, and either the system is going to collapse, or and from the ashes we can build something better and more improved that would be better for and more egalitarian for all walks of life. So yeah, I could kind of see both sides. I could see the more optimistic side, and I could see the more worrisome, pessimistic side too. Especially when you have situations like what happened in Lafayette Square, where the president wanted to get a photo op in front of a church, so he ordered the National Guard to tear gas American citizens. That doesn't really seem like anything. Like the administration is very understanding of the movement or empathetic to its desires or anything like that. So I can kind of see both sides there, but me personally, I think I'm more optimistic than anything, especially considering my generation. And I attended one of these Black Lives Matter events, and it's true. You have people there from there's all different types of races, social classes, genders, nationalities, gender, like sexual orientations, everything. It's just like a whole spectrum of people. And like Sharon said, in the 60s, that wasn't the case. It was just mostly Black Americans who were attending these protests. And you had like a few outliers, like you had people like Bernie Sanders or something like that, like walking along with, Martin Luther King and things like that. But now it's becoming more common, and it's becoming more universal or ubiquitous to. The American people are kind of waking up, and they're starting to see like what the problem is. And I would agree. I forget who said it exactly. I think it was Monique. Things have to get like worse before they get better again. And I think it's going to be hard for a moment, and it's going to be a struggle. But I think it's going to be worth it in the long run to get a more egalitarian society. I think this can be solved with, reforming the police department. That means having by law, you're mandated to have body cams, demilitarizing the police, or removing racial profiling, things of that nature. Those are some steps in the right direction. I just think, without getting political, I think we need the right administration and in charge in order to get anything like that done. So I don't know. We have a challenge in front of us as a country, and the world is watching too. So
Good, thank you. Mary, are there any questions that have come in through the chat before I open up?
One, and there was a comment. Yeli commented to Monique about the love. She said, "Love is hope." So I just wanted to let you know that. So she commented to your teaching of love. And then we only have one question, and that question is, what terminology is preferred? Black, African American, or other?
I personally prefer Black American, to be honest with you.
Black American.
Because
okay.
if technically we're all African Americans, because all humans are from Africa. So. Like, I don't know. I never really got that label. I've never even been to any country in Africa. So like, I have as much as connection to there as like a white person does, besides like the color of my skin. I prefer Black American. I feel like that's a little bit more universal. You know what I mean? More encompassing, but that's just my personal opinion. I don't think there's anything wrong with African American or even like person of color. Those aren't really bad, derogatory or any way. But my Black American for me personally.
Sharon or Brandon and Monique, do you all have a?
Well, I would have to say African American because of my genealogy. 95% Nigerian, and that's me. Is the question directed of all people or just me? I'm trying to figure out.
I think just maybe generally, like.
Yeah, just sort of your opinion, preferred term.
Or maybe it's would any of those be offensive, or which one would be the least offensive?
Well, none of them are offensive, but for me, it's African American. I mean, but we're such a melting pot of everything now. So it's difficult. I just don't know That's a tough question, but for me, I have to say African American. I have to go with, but Keenan makes a lot of sense in regards to Black American but I would have to go with African American.
Monique, Brandon?
That's a good question. I never thought about that because we normally describe ourselves as African Americans. And I agree with Keenan as well. If you say we're Black Americans, that's fine as well. I'm not sure if I like color added in there. It depends on who's saying it.
Person of color.
For me.
It's not
Yes.
color.
Person of color.
I wouldn't go for color either. I'm color. There's a little bit more, but yeah, I agree with you.
Even person of color, I think it depends on who it's coming from and the way it's used. So,
that's a great question. Whoever asked this question is a wonderful question. And I think it's awesome for one, because it's sensitive to understand, and even asking is not assuming that you know what a person likes to be called. That is a boundary. I think that's not a boundary. It is it's an area at least in America for sure, where a lot of times people assume things without asking. And it's a very simple courtesy just to ask, hey, what do you prefer to be called? That can honestly clear up any kind of confusion. I think the terms have obviously evolved over time. At one point it was Negro, that was okay. And then colored, which is kind of synonymous to like Jim Crow, colored only. So I think people move away from that because we didn't really have any ownership of some of these terms. Black, I think about the 70s, and I think about a musician and artist named James Brown who said, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. And to me, like that, I like Black or Black American because it was like we own that. It's like the other terms were just given to us or assigned to us, and we either had to just take it. We didn't have any choice. And a lot of them became connected to negative things like segregation and separate but unequal. I envision water fountains where one is really nice and one is like almost doesn't work. And the nice one is for whites only. The one is messed up is for colored only. But Black became a term that people like took pride in, had ownership of. And so for that, to me, it's empowering, and that's why I like that term.
So I have a question for Brandon and Keenan, which is that I saw a Facebook post where a man, he described himself as being, 6'4", muscular, Black man. And he said when he goes for a walk in his neighborhood, he takes either his puppy and or his 8-year-old daughter to go for the walk with him, because that way people don't see him as a threat. And so just to walk around his own neighborhood, he feels like he needs, something to make him appear, non-threatening. So Keenan, you mentioned that you've been, you were stopped by the police. Is that what you said while going for a walk?
Yeah, I wake up pretty early. So after one of my workouts, I went to go for a walk and I was stopped. It was probably like 6 in the morning, something like that. And he basically followed me, and then he stopped me, got out of his car and said, hey, what you doing? And I'm just like, I'm walking. And he was like, oh, so do you live around here? And I said, yes. And he said, do you want to tell me where you live? And if anyone of you don't know this, but you're not legally obligated to tell a police officer where you live. But if I would have said otherwise, and I would have said, I don't have to tell you where I live, I could have been, harassed or arrested or whatever. I don't know. But the fact that he stopped me just kind of shows that he was looking for some trouble like that. So I felt very unsafe in that situation, to the point where I had my rights violated. And this is a common occurrence. There's videos on the internet almost on a monthly basis where people are stopped in nicer neighborhoods, and they're asked and interrogated, where do you live, and it's just very odd. And I was basically racially profiled, and it was just a very bizarre moment, and it kind of frustrates me to this day. I've been followed. Yeah.
Yeah. Brandon, have you had any experience like that? Because you're male as well?
And he's really tall.
And really tall.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had a situation where I feel like I've been racially profiled, but I will say that knowing our history, especially from a police brutality standpoint, I am overly cautious. Like one of the most, the scariest I'll probably feel is if I see blue lights behind me and I'm driving, because it's like immediate on edge, immediate like high adrenaline, because I know how a lot of just simple stops have gone really, really south. And I don't do anything. I might go a little fast sometimes, but I'm not a dangerous criminal. I've never committed a felony. You know, I have no reason for someone to feel like I'm going to be a threat to their life. But I will say this, and just as Keenan mentioned, you know, I personally am not going to try to argue or this feels bad and it sounds bad, but I'm gonna say it. Stand up for my rights in that moment, because I just feel like it could go really, really wrong. And even though I have a right to do it, I feel like I almost have to like forfeit them in that particular moment for survival.
Yeah.
And I have to teach my son the same thing, because it's unfortunate, but it's a reality of our current society, that if I get pulled over, and I'll teach him when he starts driving, I turn the vehicle off. I stick the keys out of the door with my hands out, because I don't want to be presented as any threat at all for them to feel an adrenaline rush where they need to holster a weapon. I have several friends who have never committed a crime that have had guns pointed to their heads. And I don't know what I would do if that would have happened. So I try to do everything I possibly can to de-escalate. And that shouldn't be my responsibility. Honestly, it should be on theirs. But the reality is I'm not giving them that opportunity to try to make the right decision. I'm just going to try to take control of it myself, because I want to survive for my family.
We have 2 more questions in the chat, and I think these 2 might be quite complex, and I'm going to do one first over the next. And the first one is, it says, could you ask the speakers if they think that other communities, such as Hispanics, immigrants, like Indigenous Americans, have equal rights in real life? Or do you, maybe perhaps they're discriminated against as well?
I do think so. They're discriminated. Yes.
Yes. They get the same treatment we get, and sometimes worse in some situations.
I think some of the greatest levels of poverty in the United States are Native Americans.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious that they like look at Hispanics, for example. They're literally locking children in cages. The ICE organization, like children are being separated from their parents. People, men, women, are being locked in cages for months on end. Yeah. So I feel like, well, I think all minorities have it bad in this country, and it's kind of hard to compare, you know, negative experiences in that way. But yeah, I would agree.
Miss Sharon mentioned this earlier, as far as the word deeper. She used the word deeper in one of her responses, and that we feel like we're going deeper. And one of the things I talked to my wife about this even a few days ago was the fact that, yeah, we're addressing, you know, Black Lives Matter right now, but we haven't even scratched the surface on Hispanic and Native American discrimination and injustice. Native Americans is probably just as bad, if not worse, than the crimes that have been committed against Black people.
Trail of Tears, all that. Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
So there's this. Oops, sorry.
No, go ahead. I mean, it's just hard to really
So
grasp. the
This
level
student's
of,
asking a follow-up question to that, so maybe you can, so then this follow-up question is then, does the movement consider a more general solution as law-wise? The question was clarified a little bit. They said they meant for like all of those communities, so all of the communities that are being, you know, treated unfairly. Okay.
We stand for equality for all minorities and really all people. Like it's not just for Black people, it's for brown, light skin, it's for all. That's what we're teaching. So we believe that if, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, we were just saying, we believe it starts here. Once it starts here, then it'll be a ripple effect to make sure we're taking care of all communities in this nation.
and I think this also brings into the discussion this whole concept of all lives matter. I mean, obviously, if you say that in a general statement, nobody's going to disagree that all lives matter.
Yeah.
But there's urgent and emergent, like there's an emergency right now. It's a state of an emergency based off of the things that the whole world has seen over the last 3 months, with innocent men literally being gunned down in the street, jogging, with a person who is handcuffed face down, literally killed by someone that's supposed to serve and protect us. And the one common thread in most of these is it's an African-American man. And so in that context, it's an emergency. There's a fire in this house, in the Black Life House. It's a fire. And so the other 29 houses in the community that are not on fire should not be saying, well, our house matters too. No, the house that's on fire matters right now. We need the water. We need the firemen coming here to this address that's on fire. And then once we eliminate that fire, then we can look at other areas that are also hurting. Eventually, the ideal is that all lives do matter. Yeah. But you got to start where the pain is, where the fire is, where the emergency is. And this is the one now, but Native Americans is another one. And then there's another one with Hispanics. So there's a lot of fires right now that need to be put out. I think ours just happens to be the most intense and violent, that needs more resources. And then you start to chip away at the other emergencies one at a time.
Yeah, and I would like to add on to that. They're not saying that all lives don't matter. They're saying Black lives matter too.
Yes.
Too. Yes.
Yeah, as well.
Yes.
So that's a big thing.
Yes.
And it's usually the All Lives Matter moniker or like title, whatever they want to call it, is usually used by people that kind of want to shut down the conversation and don't really want to hear or listen to like any injustices that are going on. They don't really want to change anything because they're either ambivalent or they kind of agree with them. You know what I mean? So I agree with that statement, that sentiment.
Wonderful. And we have another question, quite complex as well. And this one is basic Black and white? What about Latinos? Which group of color? So I'm guessing this question is saying which group should maybe the Latinos be put into, perhaps, or is that a different color? But that's how it was worded, is basic Black and white. What about Latinos? Which group of color?
Yeah, I think that's probably getting more, just at the idea that there are other fires, that we need to be, there's a lot of disparity in and systemic racism against Latinos in our country as well. I would add Muslims. We haven't said that yet. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. And I don't think anybody is, forgetting that. I think that it's just there's an area of sort of concentration and emergency, like Brandon said, right now. But like one would hope that whatever sort of learning we do as a part of this moment, gets applied, to all of these areas of inequality.
And I wonder if perhaps this question was maybe in regards to, like when you're filling out a form and you have to tick a box and you're Latino, and actually I'm Latino or Latina, but, what box do you click, do you mark? So, you know, and then there's not that many options. So you're Hispanic or not, right? Or you're one
I think
or the other.
most forms now say, what is it?
Prefer not to disclose.
Oh, there's that.
Mine says Hispanic, not, what is it? Hispanic, not.
There's there's races and there's ethnicities and there's Black not Hispanic, white
Yes, Black,
white
not
Hispanic, white not Hispanic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something about that is reminding me of Keenan when you said that being mixed race, you know, with a Black parent and a white parent. I remember when I was a kid, somebody said, well, it's just wrong because then the children don't know what they are. And I thought, how strange, you know, even when I was 7 or whatever, you know, I remember thinking, well, there are people.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm a human.
Yeah.
I never.
It just when you told that story, it reminded me of that moment when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's bull crap, to be honest. Like, and they're always talking about so concerned about that, but like I've never really felt any problems. The only problems I've had is when racists say there's a problem. You know what I mean? I'm chilling. I'm fine. You know.
See people for who they are, and that's a human being. That's a human being.
Mary, was there another question you started to read?
Yeah, there's one last one, I believe. It says, what are the legal aims of the movement, you know, looking past the parade and the protest, in regards to law considerations?
I think she listed it in the PowerPoint.
Yeah, it was in the PowerPoint, I believe.
Yeah, Mary's PowerPoint was awesome.
Said a lot.
You know, obviously police reform and an end to police brutality to me is right up there at the top of the list, because we've just seen too many examples of innocent people killed at the hands of police, and there's really no explanation for it. There's no explanation for it. I think one of the things that I had a conversation with my wife about was, you know, I would love to see in every community, I think Keenan mentioned this one, I think body cams should be standard across the board. Every police officer should have a body cam on, because the reality is the only reason that the killers of Ahmaud Arbery, the killers of George Floyd were even arrested is because it was on camera. And that is sad. First of all, that's sad because they wouldn't be arrested had the world not seen it. And it's unfortunate that it takes video footage for justice to be done. So body cams, and I think also accountability for police. I think for the longest time, police have been asked to police themselves. And so you have police unions, and if there's problems internally, then their internal affairs group should technically fix the problems within their organization, but that's just not the way it works. So I would love to see some kind of citizen council in all localities, and it's an independent group that is diverse, right? So you have all different types of people, and I think that's great because it's been talked about on this call today. So Black, Hispanic, Latino, whatever terms or titles we want to use, they all should be represented, and let them decide when things are out of line, how to properly hold our police accountable, because I think we're beyond trying to let them do it themselves. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
One thing too that along those lines is that I've been hearing is that if a police officer has misconduct in one area and loses his job here in Virginia, you know, he can move to Texas and get another policing job in Texas. And so one idea I've been hearing is the idea that there should be sort of a national sharing of that information, so that when somebody applies for a policing job in Texas, you look at their record from the, you know, what they've done in other places where they've worked, and you know, that they sort of have to share their history. You know, why were they fired from their previous job, that kind of thing.
Mary, I think that even opens up an even broader discussion as far as qualifications to be a police officer in general. I saw a few things over the last couple of weeks where, you know, there's some countries where you have to have a degree, a college degree, in order to apply to be a police officer. That's not the case in the United States, and many people are fighting to say that we shouldn't do that. But I think one major problem with the United States of America is pride, and that we really believe that we have all the answers, that we are already great, quote unquote. And because of that pride, we don't look at examples of countries and areas that are doing things much better than we are to learn from. It takes humility to say, I don't have the answers. Our police system is messed up. Where in the world is police being done right, policing being done correctly? Because we don't see these stories in a lot of other countries, but we see them here over and over. So you would think at some point we say, we don't really have a good grasp on this. Who's doing it right? Yeah. And then say, okay, let's benchmark what they're doing right and let's do it. Yeah. But for some reason, we feel like we're the greatest, best, whatever, in all these different areas in the world, and we're really not. And that's the problem.
Yeah. Sharon, were you starting to add something there?
Yeah, I think what's missing when someone applies to be a police officer, there's certain areas they have to, you have to have a credit check, they have to have a physical. The big part that's missing, the piece, is a psychological evaluation. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that's not independent, it's done within the department. And I hear what Brandon's saying about the body cam. That's great. They do need a body cam. But the psychological evaluation,
I agree,
prior to their becoming a police officer needs to be done. And it needs to be done independent, not within the police department.
And often.
Because you can change,
Exactly. That I can imagine that job can change someone, mentally over time.
PTSD.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So like they do random drug tests, random psychological tests here and there, maybe once a year or twice a year. You just never know when it's coming.
Well, I think also we've noticed that a lot of times with these cases of people who ultimately, police officers who kill someone, there's sometimes indications of behavior patterns that they've already done something similar, maybe not to the extent of murder, but they've shown that, hey, there's something kind of not right about this particular officer. But again, there's nothing in our system to allow it to be addressed. Even if for some reason they do pass the screenings, there's got to be some kind of way to hold accountability. Because many times we get warning signs, but there's just nothing right now in our system that allows us to react to them properly.
Yes.
I think we're close to out of time. I wanted to show one thing real quick before we go. Let me see if I wanted to share this story just so everybody's aware of what's coming up in just 2 days. And that is June 19th, which is in the history of slavery. Slavery ended by law, but the word didn't get everywhere for, I think it was 2 years.
Yeah.
So the very last place that people learned that slavery was ended and that slaves were free was in Galveston, Texas. And that was on June 19th. In fact, just yesterday, I believe, the governor of Virginia said that he's going to move toward making Juneteenth a state holiday in Virginia. And there are events, unfortunately, we also still have a pandemic going on. But there are going to be events in Williamsburg related to the Juneteenth celebrations. So, that's something you'll be hearing about over the next couple of days. So, all right. So I believe we're just about out of time. So I think we should wrap up. Thank you. This was really great. Sharon, Brandon, Monique, Keenan, we really appreciate your time. Super interesting and great to hear about your own personal experiences. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you for having us.
Let's hear it for them.
Thank you. Thank you guys for inviting
Thank
us.
you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you guys. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. See y'all soon.